Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Ben Lang, who's an entrepreneur. In fact, he's working on a website called Mapped in Israel. Ben, what is Mapped in Israel?
So Mapped in Israel is it's a map of Israeli startups and also a site that helps people understand what's going on in the Israeli high-tech ecosystem. And its main focus is first off on helping people find work within Israeli startups, and also for people outside of Israel in other countries to understand what's going on in the startup nation. For people to explore the way the startup nation looks like through an interactive map.
How does it work? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So it's a website where you see pretty much a map that looks like Google Maps, and you can click on different startups and see what they do. You can add your own company, and you can browse by categories or search for certain companies or filter out certain sectors. It's very customizable, and it just lets you explore, what is happening in different areas in Israel, whether it's Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or Haifa, and see exactly what's going on in these different areas.
Are all of the companies on Mapped in Israel, are they only high-tech companies?
Yeah, it's all different companies in the high-tech ecosystem. So there are also accelerators and incubators and R&D centers, and most of them are startups, but there are also different types of companies within what I mentioned before.
If you made a Mapped in the United States or a Mapped in Korea, would it be as densely populated with high-tech
So
startups?
what's happened is there have been a lot of maps. New York City was the first one to do it, and I made mine like a few days later when I was home from the army in a few days, and then afterwards a ton of maps started popping up around the world. So now there are maps, a bunch of maps in the U.S. Which most of them aren't as crowded, but definitely the one in New York is very crowded. California also, but Israel definitely has one of the most densely populated ones probably in the world.
In fact, when you look at Israel, which is the area that it's most populated in terms of, which city?
Definitely Tel Aviv, but there are a lot. Haifa's catching up, and Jerusalem's also growing very fast. But for now, definitely Tel Aviv is taking over.
Do you have a sense of what some of the trends are, or what the future trends we're going to see in Israel in terms of high tech really are?
I think a lot of consumer startups have been popping up recently. There in the past, most startups were focused sort of on like chips and like enterprise software, things that were very things that Israelis learn a lot in the army, and they weren't focused on things like consumer startups like Waze, for example, or if, there's no Facebook that's come out of Israel or Twitter, and a lot of companies right now are trying to tackle those problems and build things that are targeted towards consumers. And obviously, the best example would be Waze in the past.
Yeah, yes, and I have to say I recently downloaded it. I feel like I was behind the times a little bit, but wow,
Yeah,
it's really awesome.
yeah.
So people who want to get into startup world, is it really that you just have to have an idea and you can start up a company, or do you need to find someone to fund it?
I would always, I mean, when getting started, I would always recommend working for another startup first, joining like an early stage startup, and then and learning through that. You have to build up connections with investors and find a team. It definitely takes a lot of work, and it's definitely best to start with by working somewhere else. So what I would recommend personally is to use Mapped in Israel to see companies that are hiring and to reach out to them and saying you want to join them, and hopefully it'll work out. And then you'll gain that experience, and you'll maybe after a year or two you'll be ready to build your own startup.
Okay, that sounds like wise advice. We're getting some fabulous advice from Ben Lang, who is an Israeli entrepreneur. He started a website called Mapped in Israel. But Ben, based on the advice you just gave, that it's a good idea to work for someone else, it's not obvious to me, looking at your resume, that that's what you did. It seems that you've actually started many companies and many ideas in Israel, yeah?
I actually worked for two different startups before. I worked for a company called Campile, which is a startup based in Tel Aviv, when I was in high school. And after I finished high school, I worked for a startup called Wibia, which was acquired by a company called Conduit. So in both those places, that I learned a ton. I mean, I definitely wouldn't I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I've done in the past few years without working there and meeting people and learning from other people and learning by myself at these companies. And I would recommend it to everyone. I wouldn't recommend just starting to build stuff with no experience. I would definitely recommend learning from other people by joining another company first.
And if you were talking, let's say, to kids in seventh or eighth grade or high school who wanted to be an Israeli entrepreneur one day, what would you tell them to focus on?
I think it's especially, I mean, when you're living at home and you have no costs or expenses, that's a really good opportunity to just get started and to build your own things as opposed to working for someone else. So what I would recommend is just to start building, small projects, things that you don't have to take over the world and when you're in high school, but build something that can make us an impact, something small that you can do by yourself, and learn from that. Since you have nothing, I mean, you can take as many risks as you want in high school or in middle school, and do take advantage of that. And at the same time, it's also a really good idea to work for someone, to work at an early stage startup or some high tech company, and even outside of Israel or in Israel, and gain some experience doing that at the same time.
So when you were living in the protection of your parents' house, were there any cool things that you did?
Yeah, so when I got started sort of in the tech world, what I was doing was I was very involved in eBay. I would sell people stuff for them on eBay, and take a percentage of the sale. And so what I had in my room was sort of like a shipping factory with boxes and all kinds of cool things that people were bringing me, like computers and electronics and antiques and things like that that I was selling. And that's sort of how I got into the tech world. I started like building web. I built a website for myself. I started learning how to build websites for other people and like printing business cards and learning about advertising online, things like that. So that's how I got started while I was in high school.
So how did you learn some of those basics? How did you learn to build a website?
I just mostly looked on Google. I mean, that's the best resource. Just search for whenever you're looking for something, just search on Google.
So that was your most practical educational resource rather than going to school?
Yeah, or asking people. I mean, my dad was always very helpful. I would always ask him for advice because he also comes from the tech world. And I tried to surround myself with very smart people who I could always ask for advice with, and that's helped a lot in the past.
I think that one of the reputations that Israel has internationally, for better or for worse, although kind of cool for better, is the ability that Israelis seem to have to hack into other computer systems. And there's certainly been many rumors, if not proven facts, about how we've done that. Do you think that comes from people starting young and being very maybe overly curious?
I think the military teaches a lot about that.
Hmm. All right, we don't have to go there if you don't want.
Probably not a good idea.
All right. And have you met, because you really started as a high-tech hero at a young age, have you met other people also at a young age who were similarly interested?
Yeah, I've definitely met more so outside of Israel, like in the U.S. when I lived in New York. Because hopefully, I mean, Israel doesn't seem to have. There definitely are, but not as many, unfortunately. I think there definitely should be more of a push to get into entrepreneurship in high school here before the army. But there are a good amount, and there should be we should be educating more to do that.
How would you recommend, or what sort of recommendations would you give if you were the Minister of Education?
I would maybe like have a required entrepreneurship class in high schools and even middle schools. Like establish sort of like how there are robotic clubs in different schools. So have like entrepreneurship clubs, and maybe bring startup founders to speak at different schools and inspire people. Have like the founder of Waze come into different middle schools and high schools, and everyone in these schools knows what Waze is, so it would probably hearing the story firsthand would probably inspire them to get into this field. I think there are a lot of things that can be done to do that.
I gotcha. We're sort of nearing the end of our time, but being that you're in this world, is there any like great, cool things that you see coming up in Israel that we can tell our listeners to watch out for?
I mean, I see just like tens of different startups a week, so it's hard to say specifically what's most exciting, but it's just, everything I see usually is it's just inspiring to see people putting their life their life's work into something that's going to hopefully change the world. And I really respect the people that are doing that right now, who are trying to make an impact in the world by building just amazing things. And we have a lot of that in Israel, thankfully.
Okay, and Ben, I think that you are certainly one of those people. I know that you're taking a stint in the army now, which is so important, and everyone in Israel gives back to the country. It's not just right after high school. For those of you in America who are listening, to realize that soldiers like Ben spent 3 years giving back to Israel. And then when you finish, what's your plan?
My plan is to hopefully build a startup of my own, or to join an early stage startup with maybe a few people. But it just depends on the timing, because it's very hard to find the right team and have the right idea at the right time. So yeah, I just have to be lucky.
All right. Well, I certainly wish you well. In the meantime, as we're wrapping up, can you tell people how they can follow your work?
Sure, you can follow me on my website, benlang.me, or on Twitter. My Twitter is @benln, and yeah, that's the best way.
All right, and we'll put links to that on the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com, and also a link to the Mapped in Israel website. Ben Lang, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt show.